Welcome to The Humble Daughter, a space where faith, family, and real life come together. I'm Amanda, a wife, a mom, and a follower of Jesus, learning to find beauty right in the middle of the chaos. Around here, we talk about motherhood, marriage, and trusting God's plan when life looks nothing like we expected. Because even in the ordinary, the messy, and the mundane, God is working. This is where we learn to surrender our plans and find joy in the here and now, and see that every season, even the hard ones, can be ministry. So I make this assuming that most of you know who I am, but I am sure along the way I'll pick up a few new people who don't. My name is Amanda Heibarger. I am a wife and a mom. I am a family photographer and a real estate agent in Southwest Missouri. And I decided to make The Humble Daughter because I have been a Christian woman my whole life, but I've always really struggled to find somebody that I connect with on a level of, the messy, the real, the mundane. A lot of times whenever you try to find a Christian podcast or just, a Christian, YouTuber, TikToker, everything looks so picture perfect that honestly it made me feel a little bit further from God, and it did not help me in my faith journey. So I wanted to make something a little bit more realistic and just show up every couple days or every week and have a little bit of a lesson of the season I'm in life right now, and maybe it's something that you can relate to and feel connected to, not just, me, but to your own faith journey as well. What I want to talk about this week is surrendering to God's will and surrendering your own plans for what He has planned for you. So I'm going to share a little bit of my background. A lot of you who may watch this that know me already know a lot of this, but maybe not the details. And it's not a beautiful, perfect ribbon on a story. It is a painful and kind of difficult journey that got me to where I am today, and I still am struggling with it and kind of recovering from the hustle culture of this world. So I don't come to you today perfect, that is for sure. But a couple of years ago, I was working at, actually about 6 years ago, I was working at a pediatric dental office and doing photography part-time. I just did it on the side, and eventually my photography took off to a point where I could quit working at the dental office and focus on photography, which was my passion, my joy, full time. And that was something that was extraordinary to me. I mean, my dreams were really coming true at that time, and I do feel like that was part of God's plan for me, to create these beautiful memories for other families over the last going on like 9 years now that I've been doing it. And I was able to quit and do photography full time. And it was a really interesting time in the photography community because things like mentorships and workshops and retreats and selling presets and selling education were starting to really flourish and become a big thing. And, I started to have people really, I took to photography so well. I won't say I was a natural at it. Some of my first work, I want to go call those clients and be like, I'm really sorry that I made you look like an Oompa Loompa in your gallery. But, it did come very natural and very easy to me. And I was able to have some amazing photography just friends, along the way that kind of gave me some tips or pointers, but for the most part was pretty self-taught and just really took to it. And, started an online presence, which brought me a ton of joy. And I do want to start this whole story by saying that it did bring me a lot of joy. But that online presence snowballed into a problem. But I started to have people reach out to me and ask if I would mentor them or if they could learn how to edit like me or follow me along at sessions, and just wanting to learn from me, which was really cool and a really just exciting time where I was like, oh my gosh, not only am I doing really well for myself, I have people who want to learn from me, and I didn't take that lightly, snub my nose at it. I was like, this is huge, and it was huge. It was huge. It was huge for my family. It was huge for my business. And I started teaching workshops all over the United States. I got to travel to Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, so many beautiful places, Florida, just all over the United States, and taught workshops and retreats and just had an amazing time. And I taught online courses and classes, and before I knew it, the name I had made for myself was huge. So all of this is the good part. the bad part was a couple years into it, my husband, I had asked him to quit working at his job. He wasn't really that happy at his job. He'd been there forever, and it's one of those jobs where you can't really go anywhere else. He was at the top, and it wasn't that lucrative, or it just didn't make sense for our family anymore. And I was expecting my daughter, so this is 4 years. She's almost 4, so this is about 5 years ago that we started having this talk. And then 4 years ago, whenever she was born, my husband decided to be a stay-at-home dad. I was making enough money to not only provide for my family, but be the sole provider for my family, be the breadwinner for my family, and allow my husband to stay home and be with our kids so that I could work. And that is what I did. I worked so constantly that it was alarming. I really got so I got so wrapped up in that world of being an online presence to and serve my clients well, that it was me. It was my whole identity was rooted in that. And that was probably the biggest time in my life where I have been the furthest from God. It was the time in my life that looked from the outside like the most successful time ever. And financially it was. But I was a shell of a person. I was hollow by the end of the cycle of the season of life that I'm talking about, to where that by the end, I was absolutely miserable. It didn't happen overnight. It was a very slow process, and it snuck up on me before I even knew that I was there. There was also some industry influence that was negative and very, very detrimental to my downfall. But those are things that I have chosen to not speak on. So I won't be speaking on that because it will serve nobody. So it was just this spiral, this tornado of this success that was slowly draining me, draining the life out of me. And I actually have a couple of, I guess you would call them journal entries that I want to read a few snippets from, because I almost forget how dark that time in my life was. I was working nonstop. I remember being I had an outdoor studio, editing all day. I would edit all day and night because I was traveling so constantly that in order to stay on top of editing those photos and teaching my students who wanted more all the time, as we do as human beings, it's not their fault. But I wanted to give and make sure that I was at the top of my game always. And I remember being in my studio and editing. I had stayed up all night until about 3 or 4 in the morning, and then got back up at 6 to take my kids to school and edit some more. And I could hear my kids splashing and playing in the pool right next to the building that I was in. And I remember just breaking down and sobbing. It was one of the first breaking points of many. It took me about 2 years to get out of this, but just breaking down and sobbing at the life that I was providing for my family that was so beautiful, and I was not a part of it. Just sobbing at the fact that I was a distant, onlooker to this beautiful life I had created, and I couldn't even enjoy it. I was making more money than I ever had in my life, and I was the most miserable I had ever been in my life, and felt the most disconnected from myself. And it was a really difficult time. That is going to get us to the final surrender eventually. But I want to read how dark my mind was feeling at that time, because I would keep these little journals in my computer, and whenever I was up late at night editing, I'd be waiting for something to load, and I would just type. Writing is a good outlet for me, and so I'm going to share a couple of those little tidbits with you now, and I will warn you that they aren't pretty. This one I found that's kind of, I think, in the time frame I was just talking about, because I mentioned the swimming pool. Like, it was such a small thing, but it was such a pivotal thing in my growth that I remember it so well. I talk kind of desperately in the beginning, and I say, I'm overwhelmed and going through the motion, and no one sees it. I don't even take my mask off for myself anymore. I fear it is growing into my flesh and becoming a part of me, and I just want to take it off. Am I tired, overworked, or just being dramatic? I don't even know anymore. I got out of bed at 4 a.m. and it's now 1 a.m. the next day, and I have been working without stopping this entire time. Everyone else that I love has lived their life, swam the pool, swam, drove, breathed, laughed, and I have been on my computer working for almost 24 hours. I feel like I am watching my life go by, and I am stuck behind a double-sided mirror, watching myself go through the motions and smiling on cue. Another dark writing that I had that kind of explained how I was feeling during that time, and it says it really perfectly, but again, it's kind of dark, so I apologize. I'm very dramatic. But this was definitely how I was feeling at that time. So I asked if I was happy in the things that I had at that time, basically the financial situation I had found myself in, and was kind of talking to myself about that. And the real me comes to the surface for just a minute to beg to be let back out. I really need to work less, as I was traveling and working around the clock and providing this beautiful life for my family, who had no idea, because I wore that mask so well that even my family didn't know, that I was cracking until finally, my husband saw it, because it started to come out in physical symptoms. My body, if you don't take a break long enough, your body will do it for you. And then I had to really come clean of how much I had been struggling, but I hid it so well because I didn't want anyone else to suffer or worry. And I wanted to keep up with that appearance of I can handle so much. One of the biggest compliments I would get from my following, my social media following, and from other photographers or just people that knew me is, wow, you do so much and you handle it all so well. How do you do it all? Flash forward, now that I've shared kind of where I got to, flash forward, we bought our dream home. It was the home I had wanted for so long. Everything about it was perfect, and I still mourn that home every day because now we have downsized. But I started to have some health issues come up, and a lot of things turned upside down in my world. And I realized, I started to actually hear, I know people say this all the time and it makes them sound crazy, and I know that it sounds crazy. I didn't hear an actual voice speaking to me, but I would have these intrusive thoughts that weren't my normal negative intrusive thoughts. I'm talking an intrusive voice of you need to do this, you need to stop doing this, hey, you have to do this. And I would just hear it in my own head, but I firmly believe that it was finally the voice of God saying, enough. You can't keep up with this anymore. You can't maintain this anymore, and you have to surrender. And surrender started to be a really big word for me. I named a preset pack that I was making after it, because I'm oh, how can I tie this into my work? Because of course I would. That was what I lived for. But it was around that time that I started to hear that word and think of that word all the time. You have to give this up. You're going to have to give up everything that you have worked really, really hard for to find yourself again, and find your joy again, because it wasn't all bad. I got to provide so many amazing things for my kids and my family that I didn't want to let them down. I thought I will have to work myself to death till death, because I don't want to let my family down. But that was all just negative self-talk. My family wants me to be happy. So what I want to talk about today with all of that is surrendering, and the plan that God has for us that is always going to be so much different than the plan that we have for ourselves and what we think that our future and our lives look like. We sold our dream home because to keep up with it, with the health issues that I was also having. Luckily, I didn't have major mental health issues, because I feel those are so hard. Obviously I was drowning and overwhelmed and exhausted and unhappy, but I luckily didn't have any other major mental health issues. I was having actual physical health issues. It became very clear that we couldn't keep it up. What we had going, we just couldn't keep up. So I finally, slowly, over a long period of time, surrendered, and I am just now letting go of so many things that I was still holding on to with as a death grip. We sold our dream home so that we could minimalize and I could work less. And I stopped traveling. We haven't traveled in over a year for education or photography. Which traveling sounds fun, and people are why would you quit traveling? But it just, in the capacity that I was doing it, it wasn't. And we have downsized everything in our life and slowed everything down. And I have stopped posting my life depends on it on social media. I have changed my career path a little bit. I'm still doing photography. I'll always love photography, but I'm also doing real estate. I'm baking, I'm doing all these slower, calmer things. And I had a lot of come to Jesus moments, like true come to Jesus moments during this transition and this time of surrender, this painful surrender. I did not surrender easily or gently. I fought it every step of the way. And I still struggle with it today. I struggle with letting go of my dream home that I worked so hard on and that I wanted, and this appearance of having it all together and sharing my honest and raw truth is still something that scares me to death. But I want to give hope to someone who is in a season of life where you have prioritized things that you shouldn't, and hope that you can get to a place of peace that I'm at now. Again, I'm working on it every day. And I want to talk next week a little bit about accepting the things that you have, being thankful for what you have and not always wanting for more earthly things. That's what I want to talk about next week. But this week we're talking just about surrender. I wanted to read, I have to pull up my computer here, a couple of verses that are about surrender and God's plan for you, and how they kind of help me through go of the lifestyle and the hopes that I had for myself, if that makes sense, and surrendering to God's will and finding myself and my happiness again in a humble home, working less, having time to bake and, play outside with my kids, and just giving my body respite and feeding it with, the Word of God and connection and community instead of appearances and financial gain. So that was really helpful for me. It's kind of about choosing to trust instead of trying to compare or control. I'm very controlling. I like to have full control over everything. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for Him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways. Stillness is a form of surrender. And that's something that I really had to learn. That was Psalm 37:7. Philippians 4, verse 6-7. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your request to God, and the peace of God will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. True surrender brings peace and shouldn't bring panic. And if you are panicking, then you are not trusting God. And that was something that I really had to remind myself, is when I'm being anxious and I'm worrying about what's going to happen, or worrying was mostly financial for me. I accepted, hey, I'm not going to be a big Instagram influencer anymore. I don't have time for it. I'm committing too much time to it. People pleasing, all these people online and my students, and it was just too much. But the hardest thing to actually surrender and not worry about and have true faith about was our finances, because I had to do all that to keep up with and take care of. I have 5 children and a husband, and I was the breadwinner, if you will. And so I worried about that, and I still worry about that every day. That's something really hard to not worry about in the world that we live in, but I have had to remind myself that the more that I'm anxious and I worry about it and I fret about it, I'm not trusting God's will, and I'm not fully surrendering. I'm trying to hold on to just a little bit more control, and that is not the joy and peace that God wants for me. Something that I have had to remember is that even when life feels uncertain, His plan is already written, and it is good. I always think of the song, we sing it at church, He has good plans for you, for me. That's how the song goes. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. And that is something that I have to remind myself of during this surrender journey that I am on. If you are on one too, then leave me a comment. Let's chat, let's connect. It is very difficult. I am choosing every day. Sometimes I just have to lean back and rest and be like, okay, God's got this. It's okay that life is not exactly like it was before, and everything isn't picture perfect like it seemed to be before, but I am 100% sure that I am happier now in a more humble home, making a fraction of the money I made before, not traveling at all, and being close to my family, feeling like myself, getting to enjoy our family events, spend all night up editing like I'm laying in bed at night, trying to get sleep if my kids let me, and just feeling like myself again and feeling close to God again for the first time in years. I never lost my faith. It's always been a huge part of me, but during that time I was so busy. I wasn't taking care of myself, and I certainly was not taking care of my relationship with God, and choosing to surrender and change our lifestyle, things like that. Just choosing this more humble and happy life has been 100% the best choice I could make. So if you want to join me next week, I want to talk about kind of this need and desire that I have, and I know a lot of people have, for more. I will not lie and say that being in this older, smaller fixer-upper of a home has been easy for me, and that is crazy to say with what some people in this world have. And I think that it's important to kind of talk about and be raw and honest about. I want to remodel the kitchen. I want to do this. I want to do that. Like, I'm constantly want this. Want everything to be perfect. Want more. And the Bible has a lot to say about that, and kind of helping our hearts to not be restless, and to not want all these earthly things all the time that we don't need and aren't going to fill any voids for us, is something that I really want to chat about next week. So I will see you then.